I just figured that out playing this game.
Oh, look at that. That's excellent.
I am a competitor, and I was just like, I'm going to lose this. Her heart was probably pounding. Her cheeks were
So welcome to this Edwin Teacher Talk, where we highlight Edwin teachers. I'm Jody Denny. I'm a classroom success facilitator, and I'm here with my colleague Sherry, who is coming in from Alberta. On our Teacher Talk today, we have Josh Gatner, who is an Alberta educator. So thank you so much for being here. Josh, can you introduce yourself?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm really excited about our conversation today. My name is Josh Gatner. I teach grades 7 to 9 in a small rural school just north of Lethbridge, Alberta. I've been teaching for 21 years. I've taught everything from calculus in grade 12 all the way down to grade 5, I want to say. I've got a pretty decent background in teaching math, and we've been piloting the Edwin program for the last 4 years. Well, I guess we're in the middle of our 4th year at the school here now. So it's something we've become relatively familiar with, and it's been a really good addition to the arsenal of tools we bring to the table.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that lots of teachers are going to find this conversation valuable. Sherry, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sherry. So self-proclaimed math geek. Love dabbling my fingers in anything math and I've supported everything from grade 1 up to grade 10. And I'm part of the Edwin Classroom Success team as well, because I am also a self-proclaimed tech head, and I feel like math and tech are just a marriage that's meant to be. So that's what brings me here.
Thank you both so much. I was on a call the other day, and I mentioned during it was a PD session, I said, well, I'm not a math person. And then an administrator popped into the chat and she said, Jody, everybody is a math person.
Yes.
And she is right. But the reality is that, there's lots of students who don't feel that way. There's lots of students who struggle with math. They feel like they just don't get it, or they just don't have the natural ability to pick up on different skills. And, I think as educators, we try to, lead them with that growth mindset of learning math. I'm just curious, Josh, what would you consider yourself a natural with math, or maybe a late bloomer? And how does your perception of yourself inform your teaching?
It's a great question. I would say that overall, it's a huge journey. I think I kind of grew up in a time where it was, the atmosphere of right and wrong was very ingrained, and where we get some of those people who are frustrated with math, probably more frustrated with just being frustrated, as opposed to the actual numbers. But that's the kind of setup I was brought up in. I think as I've gotten older and I've seen more of it, I've come to realize it's less about how many things do you know how to do, and more just that willingness to explore the numbers and to communicate about them and learn from each other, and that process, that collaborative process of math, has really taken the forefront in my teaching and in my learning, and what really excites me about math. So I like those sorts of things, kind of like collective puzzle solving or something. So
yeah, that's true. Would you say that the focus on the final answer rather than the process? Because I know when I was a student, the final answer gave me a lot of anxiety, and I felt like my process work and how I got there was often overlooked. And it was just well, that's wrong, red mark, not that it did impact my self-esteem in math. I will say it definitely did, because, I did get a lot of those steps right along the way. But somehow, somewhere in that process, I kind of veered off. But would you say that there's more of a focus away from that now, or? Oh,
for sure. I think we've been taking a good page from the English people, when they talk about how you make a rough draft first, and you make an outline, you kind of have a plan, you kind of try a few things and see what sticks, get some feedback, and finally submit a good copy. And I think that's where we're doing our best work as math teachers, is when we start to talk about, okay, well, where do we want to head with this question? What do we want to accomplish with it? What kind of techniques and tools should we use? do? Should we make a table? Should we graph it out? What's the best way to get us to where we want to get? And then eventually work through it and see if there's any errors or if it makes sense. And so I think that same kind of process still exists. And that we need to be more aware of how important it is, because that's where the learning happens.
Yeah, for sure. Sherry, you're just a natural at math, right?
Thanks. I don't know about that. To be honest, Josh, I love your analogy of comparing it to English language arts teachers. I had not considered it that way before. The lens that I bring is I'm actually a music and band teacher, but it's the same concept. I see extreme parallels there, that it's about the practice and the identifying your errors and deciding, where do I go from here? Does this require teacher intervention? Is this something that I can work on my own? Is this something I need a group sort of collaborative effort to work on? I love that analogy though, English language to rough draft and working towards that. I think that's excellent.
Well, I think like the lens which I view math through has changed considerably, especially over the last 5 years or so, as I was exposed to some of the work that Peter Liljedahl was doing with Thinking Classrooms, and his work has been really fundamental in changing how I've taught, and that really getting down to that process of what are we going to do, and getting our kids up in front of vertical non-permanent services and random groupings, right, and really talking and describing our thinking, and like that's all super, super important and really, really important for us to focus on.
Yeah, and I think the shift to that as the central focus of math learning will help more students realize that they are math learners.
I think so too, especially when you've got these groups together where everybody has something to contribute to, right, which makes you feel good about yourself. I mean, I've been in a classroom even just this year where we've got some really, really high-end learning kind of kids, like they're off and they don't need much help from me. I could be a fire hydrant. They would still learn this math, right? And you've got some other kids who really struggle and they're in the same group together, and to see how they take care of each other a little bit, but also to be able to say, ask some probing questions and to say, well, where do you think that comes from? And all these kids can contribute whatever there is that they're thinking about to that. And that helps them, I think, make sense of all the math that we've got, right?
I love that. Also, I think that there isn't just one right way of doing something. That same math presentation that I was in, the teacher had up a few different sets of numbers, and he said, "Okay, I want everyone to tell me what the mean is, and then think about how you came to that." And everyone had a different way of figuring out the mean. I just thought there was one way. I was like, "Oh, of course, it's just this way." And, there was at least 10 different ways. It was like, I was mind blown, of course, because I thought I was not a math person, but I learned everybody is. And that to me was like, there's, that gives hope to so many students that they don't have to fit into one way of doing it in math, right? So I think that's pretty relevant too. Josh, what is your favorite math topic to teach and why? Go.
Oh, I love probability. I love talking with kids about how to find those things and to be able to use it. I find probability ends up being embedded in our lives in all kinds of decisions we make, right from, what should I wear today? Well, it looks like it might rain, just simple things like that, to whether you're talking about investments or anything. I think there's lots of rich questions and not right answers. You know what I mean? Like there's wise answers, which is something I try and push with my kids. Like there's not necessarily right and wrong, but there's wise decisions we can make. And when we make those wise decisions, we sometimes get further along than if we had to kind of slog through things, So I like and of course, to be able to play all kinds of games is fun. So get the dice and the spinners and make it hands-on. So that that people can see it and interact with it on multiple levels. That's certainly one of my favorites to do.
What have your students been saying? Like, do they find Edwin engaging? Is it making it fun? Is making it math fun for them? What's like the general feedback you're getting from students?
I think it depends on the student, and I think it depends on the topic. There are some favorite, activities that we've done that they really like. I know that we used Desmos not that long ago. I know, Sherry, we were talking about this lawnmower problem, and it kind of, and then I showed my kids that, and they hated. This is way too hard, Mr. Gander. Like, it's going to be all right. It's going to be, and so.
And yet, you were geeking hard about it.
But then we did one called Translation Golf, and they really liked that, and they found some success there. So it was a different, complete topic and stuff, but they really enjoyed that part. So depending on the topic and where the kids are at and what their personalities are, it'll depend on what their favorites were, for sure.
Do you see the potential for kids wanting to create their own math, like things like that within Edwin, using the geometry tool in there or the other math tools in there? Do you see that as being an eventuality when they become more comfortable with it?
So. I mean, that's where the goal of a teacher being to replace ourselves, so they don't have to come to us and say, what do we do here, to be able to have them to be literate enough in mathematics to be able to say, well, I think I could make a really cool logo out of doing some translations and reflection, Mr. Ganner. Well, let's do it then, and then just being there to facilitate and having them work with it and create on their own. That's the goal of any learning, is to be able to assimilate it to that kind of a level where they're using it themselves creatively, right? Yeah. So I hope that's where we end up, and time will tell. I think it's going to take them a little while to get to that point, like to be able to introduce these tools all at once in 1 year and expect the kids to be ready to go might be viable. But I think after a couple of years, I could absolutely see it for sure.
Josh, what would you tell a new teacher who's using Edwin, and then, they're interested in using the tool to support their math program, but they're not sure where to start and they're a little hesitant, maybe a little uncomfortable with tech? What advice would you give to those teachers?
Be brave. Try. It's okay to fail. We think we expect our kids to be able to say, oh, you know what? Let's have a growth mindset and be okay if something went wrong, we'll go back and relook at it, right? To be able to model that and have something fall flat on their face and say, I tried this cool thing and it really didn't work, did it? No. What should we do to come back at it and circle back around and try again and show some grit? To be able to model that for our kids is super important. If everything went perfectly right every single time, I think we're doing our kids a disservice a little bit,
Right.
I think modeling, what do you do when things go badly is perfect. So if you see something, you're like, I don't know if my kids will be able to handle it. Why not try it out and see where you end up, and then, tomorrow's a new day, So
I know something that I often bring up is that teachers who are trying Edwin and then trying to incorporate it as a new tool into their practice are taking a risk. Mm-hmm. And they are technically they're adding to their workload just because they're learning something new. They're getting out of their comfort zones. They're trying something they've never tried before. And yet the feedback we get is just it pays off. People are so pleased with it. They say, where has this been all my life? How did I teach without it before? And so it's just, I think if I were talking with more new teachers who are new to Edwin or even new to teaching, period, I think the one thing I would say is to piggyback on what you said, Josh, is take a risk and be okay with taking it, and then be okay with potentially failing.
Well, and it's important to come back to it too. It's fine to say take a risk, and then they go, well, it's screwed up, and so I'm not going to go back to that because the other thing worked better. To keep coming back, I think one of the biggest strengths of the Edwin platform right now, in my opinion, is that over the last 4 years, we've seen all kinds of movement as the developers and the people who are supporting are changing things, like the inclusion of Desmos embedded into some of the assignments was jaw-dropping to me. I didn't see that before, but these things are evolving and changing. So even if it didn't work, let's say last year's oh, well, that one wasn't the greatest, even go back to it this year, because things might have changed. There might be a new tool that's involved, and that's huge, because one of the things we can do right now is we can point at our textbooks and say, it's so out of date, it's so bad, it's so, it was published 20 years ago, and it hasn't caught up. And right now we've got this digital platform that can keep up and can change and can respond to what we need and what we want and what works best. So even if something does work, like the feedback that I've been like, send off an email and give them feedback and tell them what needs to change. And lo and behold, it does change, which is really, really cool. And a really important thing that we haven't had access to traditionally up to this point,
Yeah, that's great. We actually just celebrated some of those things today.
Yeah.
on the Classroom Success Team. We had some new updates roll out today. I don't know if you noticed them.
I did not notice at all.
Yeah, the spinner, it used to be numbers, now it's letters. We have the notes and highlights can now save as text files, like the highlights can also save as text files.
Right.
Things like that. And then we also just celebrated the same piece that you just mentioned. There was another math teacher in Southern Alberta who wanted access to the videos that were made for teachers. She wanted her students to also have access to those. And this was a common feedback I'd heard from lots of math teachers in Alberta. So we let the development team know, and they made it happen. And to be able to pass along, like, Josh, you told us this, we took it up the pipe and they created this change, is just so rewarding for me as somebody who supports teachers, because I love to see those teachers say,
you listened.
So much easier. You actually listen.
I think we're kind of used to a bit of the, send your feedback, and then the feedback loop, the how quickly you get some information back about whether or not that feedback was effective or whether or not they took it. We're used to a very long lead time. It's like maybe years in some cases, where this can be very quick, weeks, no problem. Things have changed all of a sudden, you know what I mean? And so it is that immediate reward from that feedback is there.
Now, Josh, you brought it up, so no going back now. You mentioned that you like fractions and pattern blocks.
Right.
So here is your math challenge. And Gary, if you don't mind being his competitor here.
Okay.
We're going to ask you to please share your screen. This is a speed challenge, and you're going on trust here that you're doing this, Sherry.
Oh, so I have to answer honestly, then, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So, Josh, if you can open up your math tools on the left-hand side, just clicking on that little cup.
Yep.
Please open up your pattern blocks.
Did I win? Is it fast enough?
And in the chat, I'm going to write out how many? 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 fractions I'm going to write out. Okay. And right when I hit enter, you are going to, as quick as you can and as accurately as you can, compete against our own Edwin Classroom Success Team regional team lead, Sherry Ross.
A lot of pressure.
Right. And see who can recreate these fractions using the pattern blocks. Are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I will account for the fact that Josh has to navigate from the chat over to his Edwin tools. Okay. So let's take into account that leg time.
Okay. Let's be fair. Okay. So 5, 4, 3, 2, boom.
So we're supposed to make all of these, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So one of the first things I teach my kids is that they have to make sure to define what the number 1 is, because fractions can't necessarily exist in isolation. They're usually a fraction of something else, right? By definition. So if I wanted to go and create a third, I would just define it as 1, and then I would bring this one here. Now, one of the things I also do is I try and, so I've got this page marker that I'm a little bit addicted to, so I would write that down afterwards.
Thanks for that, by the way, Josh.
That is such a good tip. So how do people get that? How do teachers get that?
Oh, I think it's a Chrome extension. That's one of the things. So the first one is being 1/3, but it's not behaving like I want it to, but that's okay. So that's the first one is 1/3. Then I need 1/6. So that'll be this one here. Then we have 2/6, which is kind of the same fraction as the one above.
And this is something they just changed, Josh. So if you want to rotate a pattern block, you just click on it.
Okay.
I just figured that out playing this game.
Oh, look at that. That's excellent.
And when you're finished, you got to hit the buzzer.
Oh, where's the buzzer?
Where's the buzzer?
Well, you got to make the noise of a buzzer.
Oh yeah, I was done forever ago. I have to say, but this is why. This is the difference between Josh and I. Josh is a real teacher, and he talked through the process. I am a competitor, and I was just like, I'm gonna win this.
Her heart was probably pounding. Her cheeks.
Oh yeah, I got ready. My hands slipped off my mouse.
Edwin won. I don't know. What board are you with, Josh? What board is it?
Holy Spirit Catholic Schools in
Holy Spirit.
Okay. Yeah.
Edwin won. Holy Spirit. Yeah.
I don't know. But what are we giving points for? Because if we want rich responses, Josh,
there you go. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's a winner. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, that was so fun. Thank you so much. I was a little bit intimidated to come on the call with two math people, but that was so great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your encouragement to new Edwin teachers in using math, and we really appreciate you taking the time during your week off, so on a Friday afternoon. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sherry, for organizing this.